Henry Chapman Mercer was an American tile maker, archaeologist, and writer. Born in 1856 at Doylestown, Pennsylvania, the son of William Robert Mercer. He studied at Harvard between 1875 and 1879, before studying law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. He was admitted to the Pennsylvania bar but never practiced law. After spending several years in Europe, he became the curator of American and prehistoric archaeology at the University of Pennsylvania Museum. He wrote books on archaeology, such as his The Lenape Stone, or The Indian and the Mammoth, and The Antiquity of Man in the Delaware Valley, or on the history of tools, such as his Ancient Carpenter's Tools. He was also an avid collector, his collection being housed in the Mercer Museum in Doylestown. Mercer died in 1930 at Bucks County, Pennsylvania. In 1928, Mercer published November Night Tales, a collection of ghost stories in the Jamesian vein, with some slight hints of L.T.C. Rolt in his use of abandoned docks, ruined factories, and desolate industrial yards. Castle Valley sees the protagonist discovering his friend Prior painting close by where one of the protagonist's ancestors once planned to build a castle, but who died without ever accomplishing his goal. Prior, it turns out, had managed to find a lost heirloom of his friend's family, a magic stone which enables him to see a vision of the unbuilt castle. The stone soon begins to possess Prior, however, until he is left comatose, all according to the doomsday prophecies of local powwow doctor Michael Schronk, leaving the protagonist with the task of trying to save him. The North Ferry Bridge is the story of a poor doctor and of his confrontation with a villainous escaped mad scientist who plans to spread cholera all throughout the city with his army of infected white rats. The Blackbirds is a story that is somewhat hampered by its abrupt end. The two main characters' artist friend suddenly disappears on them as they are taking a lunch in a rubbish-littered agricultural backwater. They try to find him and end up in a weird shed where muffled men in robes are feeding a human corpse to a group of vultures. The location writing is great, focusing on all the scattered rubbish and abandoned machinery to form an unusual, yet still very unsettling scene. But once the disappeared artist is found on the train tracks, the story just sort of ends without explaining anything. The Wolf Book is the story of a professor boating around Serbia seeking rare manuscripts in monastery libraries. He eventually, by accident, winds up buying a medieval exorcism scroll specifically made to deal with werewolves. On his way back home, the book keeps getting stolen by what he assumes to be gypsies, but what are in fact werewolves. It winds up being rather obvious, and hence it seems the professor is a bit short on the uptake. The Doll's Castle is a tragic ghost story about what happens when a playwright and his friend trace an infamous ghost house whose last tenant went mad when her child disappeared, and who took to amassing a huge collection of dolls instead. Especially tragic and rather boneheaded is the idea of taking the playwright's friend, along with his wife and son, to the place where they already saw a mysterious old man accompanying a creepy little girl offering them dolls. The sunken city has the protagonist sent along to do a geological survey of mines in Bosnia, and winding up in the middle of a noted scoundrel of an academic and his plot to find a giant golden statue of the god Asclepios in the sunken city of Epidauro, which the eccentric local count says sunk into the sea and will soon rise again, because he believes he can predict earthquakes. The description of the sunken city rising from the depths is almost Lovecraftian, though there are no ancient horrors about. The Well of Montecorvo, not part of the original collection, and included in the 2015 Valancourt edition, is mostly the story of the protagonist trying to find an old relic that Dürer threw into a well somewhere in Italy several hundred years ago. Certainly a very good collection, especially when being such a late debut for Mercer as a fiction writer.